What you are looking at right now is a pile of rusted iron chain. Old, forgotten, covered in oxidation and decades of neglect. Most people would throw it away without a second thought. But in the right hands, in the right fire, that chain is about to become one of the most iconic weapons in the history of martial arts. It is going to become a sai. Before the first link ever touches the forge, you need to understand what a sai actually is. Because most people think they know, but most people are wrong. The sai is not simply a knife. It is not a sword. It is not even primarily a cutting weapon. It is something older, stranger, and far more intelligent than that. The sai traces its origins to the Ryukyu Kingdom, the island chain we now call Okinawa, sitting between Japan and China in the East China Sea. For centuries, the Ryukyu Kingdom was a trading hub, pulling culture, weapons, and philosophy from Japan, China, Korea, and Southeast Asia all at once. And somewhere in that collision of civilizations, the sai was born. There are scholars who believe the sai evolved from an ancient Indian weapon, the Trishula, the three-pronged trident carried by the god Shiva himself. Others believe it descended from an agricultural tool, a simple iron spike used to plant seeds in the soil of Okinawa's rice paddies, its two side prongs added later to help space the rows. The truth is almost certainly somewhere in between. A practical tool that met a practical need for defense and slowly, deliberately, became something sacred. What made the sai so remarkable was its design philosophy. The long central prong, the Monouchi, was built for striking. The two curved side prongs, the Yoku, were built for something far more clever: trapping and locking a blade mid-swing. A skilled sai user could catch a sword between those prongs and snap the wrist of the attacker in the same motion. You were not just carrying a weapon, you were carrying a weapon that neutralized other weapons. In 1609, the Satsuma clan of Japan invaded Okinawa and banned the civilian population from carrying bladed weapons. The Okinawans did not stop training. They adapted. The sai, technically a blunt instrument with no sharp edge, slipped through the restriction. Okinawan law enforcement and constabulary carried it openly. Martial artists trained with it in secret. It became the symbol of a people who refused to be defenseless, even when they were told they had no choice. The sai is always used in pairs, one in each hand, moving in complement, blocking and striking and trapping in a continuous rhythm. In the Okinawan martial tradition of Kobudo, the old weapons art, the sai is considered one of the 5 core weapons, alongside the bow staff, the nunchaku, the tonfa, and the kama. To master the sai is to understand that a weapon does not have to be aggressive to be deadly. Patience, positioning, and geometry will always defeat raw force. And now, that ancient weapon begins its rebirth, link by rusted link, out of iron that has forgotten what it was supposed to be. The process starts with the chain itself. Each individual link is a small, forged piece of iron, and when you look closely, you can see the quality still living underneath all that rust. The surface is compromised, but the core is still there, still dense, still worth something. The first job is cleaning, grinding away the oxidation until the raw metal underneath has room to breathe and bond. When you stack forge-welded chain links together, you are doing something that blacksmiths have done for thousands of years, taking separate pieces of iron, heating them past the point where the metal becomes plastic, and hammering them into a single, unified mass. Done right, the weld is invisible. The steel becomes one piece with no internal boundary, no weak point where the metals meet. The chain stops being a chain and starts being a billet, a block of raw material ready to be shaped into anything the smith can imagine. The forge does what fire always does. It strips away the pretense. heat past 800 degrees and metal stops being rigid and starts being honest. Malleable, responsive, shaped by intention rather than by force alone. Every heat is a conversation between the smith and the steel. The steel tells you when it is ready by the color it holds. A dull red means it is warming up. An orange glow means you are getting there. A bright yellow-orange, almost white at the edges, means the metal is as ready as it will ever be. And every second you spend not working, it is a second wasted. The hammerwork is where the sai begins to emerge. The central prong, the long main spike, has to be drawn out first. This means stretching the billet lengthwise, compressing the cross-section, elongating the piece blow by blow until it reaches the right proportions. It sounds simple. It is not. Every hammer blow has an angle and a purpose. Off-center strikes introduce twists that are nearly impossible to correct later. The rhythm has to be consistent, the rotation of the piece deliberate, the eye constantly checking the line of the taper as it develops. Then come the yoku, the side prongs. This is where forging a sai parts ways with forging a simple blade and becomes something genuinely complex. The side prongs have to branch out from the main body symmetrically, curving outward and slightly upward at just the right angle to function correctly. They cannot be welded on as an afterthought. They have to be drawn out from the parent material itself, splitting the mass of the billet in two directions while the center continues developing. One side too thick, one curve too shallow, and the entire geometry of the weapon is wrong. The sai will still look like a sai, but in the hand, it will feel like a lie. This is the part of the build that separates a craftsman from a hobbyist. The patience to go back to the fire again and again, to reheat and refine, to take the prongs back up to temperature when they start to cool and harden before they are fully shaped. The steel does not forgive impatience. A prong rushed into its final shape while the metal is too cold will carry microfractures you cannot see until something hard hits it at exactly the wrong angle 6 months from now. The grinding stage is where the piece starts to look like the thing it is becoming. The belt grinder removes the scale and hammer marks that accumulated during the forging, revealing the clean profile underneath. The central prong gets its final taper, blunt at the tip by tradition because the sai was never primarily a stabbing weapon, but with enough definition to make the point unmistakable. The flats of the prongs get their finished geometry. The junctions where the yoku branch away from the central shaft get cleaned up and smoothed, until the transition feels natural rather than mechanical. The handle, the tsuka, is the part most people overlook. But in a weapon that is used in close quarters combat, in a weapon where your grip is the only thing between you and losing control of the tool entirely, the handle is everything. It has to fit the hand. It has to provide enough surface area for a secure grip, even when the hand is tired or wet. It has to balance the weight of the prongs so that the weapon sits correctly, neither tip-heavy nor pommel-heavy, but neutral and alive in the grip. Traditional SAI handles were wrapped in cord or leather, materials that provided texture and grip and could absorb the shock of impact. The wrapping pattern was not random. It was a specific technique passed down through generations of Okinawan craftsmen, tight enough to hold firm under stress, with enough complexity in the pattern to prevent the wrap from shifting during use. And then there is the polishing. This is the meditative part of the build. The long, quiet work of moving through progressively finer abrasive grits until the surface of the steel is no longer rough and industrial, but smooth and alive and reflective. Under fine polish, the chain-link origin of this SAI starts to show in the steel itself. The repeated welding and folding of the iron links has created subtle variations in the surface, layers, patterns, a kind of grain that makes this specific piece of steel completely unique. No other SAI in the world was made from this chain. No other SAI will ever look exactly like this one. That is what hand forging does that no factory process can replicate. It puts the history of the material directly into the finished piece. You can look at this SAI and see, in the texture of the steel, the story of a chain that was retired from one purpose and given a completely different reason to exist. The ancient Okinawan masters who developed the sai as a fighting system had a philosophy about weapons that is worth carrying with you. They believed that a weapon is an extension of the practitioner's intention, that the steel itself has no virtue or malice, but takes on the character of the person who wields it. A weapon in disciplined hands becomes a tool of protection. The same weapon in undisciplined hands becomes a danger to everyone, including its owner. What you are looking at right now is the finished product. A sai forged entirely from rusted iron chain, polished, balanced, wrapped, and ready. It carries in its steel the ghost of every link that went into the fire before it. It carries in its shape the accumulated wisdom of hundreds of years of Okinawan martial tradition. It carries in its prongs the geometry of a weapon system designed not to destroy, but to neutralize, to intercept force rather than create it. From rust to ruin to something that will outlive everyone in this shop. That is what a forge is for. If you want to see what else comes out of this fire, subscribe and hit the bell. There is always something new waiting in the coals. Forged in furnace gives you the best.